Chapter 346. The Rumor. 1. The Sichuan Tang clan's declaration of seclusion. It was an inevitable decision due to a lack of alternatives, but the clan sought to delay the news from spreading as much as possible to preserve their pride as a martial arts family. However, despite their efforts, word of the Sichuan Tang clan's seclusion spread rapidly throughout the Central Plains. The Sichuan Tang clan is a martial arts family composed of blood relatives. Although they solidified their bloodline through connections with cadet branches and subclans, they did not completely exclude marriages with outsiders. If a union greatly benefited the clan, they would establish blood alliances through marriage with renowned martial arts families. As a result, there were some members within the Tang clan who hailed from outside the family. No matter how much they tried to conceal it, some details of that day's events inevitably leaked out. Flap flap. The carrier pigeons they sent arrived at the intelligence divisions of each martial arts clan. Since the messages were delivered by birds, distance was meaningless. In less than a fortnight, the news reached even the Righteous Alliance, the heart of the orthodox martial arts world. Military and Intelligence Division of the Righteous Alliance headquarters. The head of this division is Zhuge Duyang, the Righteous Alliance's top military advisor. Someone hurriedly entered his office. Bang. Who dares? Vice Alliance Leader, it's you. Zhuge Duyang rose from his seat and cupped his hands in salute. He wondered who would enter his office without permission, but it was the Righteous Alliance's second-in-command, Vice Alliance Leader Wei Takhayan. Considered one of the 8 stars, the top masters of the current martial arts world, he was among the 5 most prominent experts within the Righteous Alliance. Usually he had an almost perpetual smile on his face, but his expression was far from pleasant at the moment. Is this true? Vice Alliance Leader Wei Takhayan pushed a red scroll, a report, in front of Zhuge Duyang. Seeing this, military advisor Zhuge Duyang sighed and spoke. Phew. I sent it as an urgent document requesting swift action. Are you only reading it now? Do you think this is the only urgent report I've received recently? If it's something like this, you could have informed me directly. I also had numerous matters to handle because of this. Moreover, I marked it as an urgent document that must be processed immediately, using a red scroll tied with a golden thread, did I not? At Zhuge Duyang's words, Vice Alliance Leader Wei Takhayan clicked his tongue and spoke in a conceding tone. I understand. I failed to pay proper attention to it. But what is this shocking news? The Tang clan has gone into seclusion. It's exactly as written in the report. Exactly as written. Does it make sense for the Sichuan Tang clan to admit defeat and go into seclusion because of a single person? Under normal circumstances, even an urgent report would not have reached the intelligence division. However, this report could not be ignored. The name mentioned in the report had appeared more than once. There was one particular group affiliated with the Righteous Alliance that refrained from intervening in worldly affairs unless it was a special case. It was none other than the Shaolin Temple of Mount Song, the birthplace of orthodox martial arts and the center of the righteous martial arts world. Shocking news arrived from Shaolin. Shaolin's 108 Arhat formation defeated by a single martial artist. It was an extremely shocking piece of information. Since the establishment of Shaolin, there had been only one instance of the 108 Arhat formation being defeated by a single person, or so he had heard back in the old martial arts era. However, that situation was different. That individual was universally acknowledged as the heaven's first sword by all martial artists. Yet such an event had occurred for a second time. Moreover, the current 108 Arhat formation was renowned for having its weaknesses rectified and its power greatly enhanced after learning from the previous incident. Qianma, Heavenly Demon. That was the name given to the person who single-handedly shattered the 108 Arhat formation. It was uncertain if this was his real name. Heavenly Demon. Who would give someone such a title? It was a moniker that only deranged individuals walking the path of evil would adopt. Who exactly is this person? I don't know. You don't know? Nothing at all. I know nothing. Although it happened within Shaolin, the little information we have is thanks to the embroidered uniform guards who entered. No clues about his appearance, attire, or any hints about his affiliation with a particular group? I heard he looks quite young. Looks young. Vice Alliance Leader Wei Takhayan clicked his tongue. Once one reached a certain level of cultivation, outward appearance held no meaning. Among those who had attained enlightenment, some underwent physical metamorphosis, regaining their youthful appearance. The problem was the accurate description of his appearance. We must find him. This has gone beyond the point of simply ignoring it. Shattering Shaolin's 108 Arhat formation with a single palm strike could be considered a display of his immense martial prowess. However, the Sichuan Tang clan's seclusion was a different matter. The Sichuan Tang clan was a pillar of the Righteous Alliance and one of the 7 great clans of the martial arts world. Their influence on the orthodox martial arts community was significant. They had declared a seclusion lasting a staggering 60 years. The Tang clan itself wielded considerable power, but now the only group capable of countering the poisons and secret weapons of the evil sects was absent. Military advisor Zhuge Diang nodded in agreement. You are correct. From the moment he forced the Sichuan Tang clan into seclusion, it became clear that this person is closer to an evil cult leader than a righteous martial artist. Even his name or title, Qianma, already suggests an evil cult leader. What's more concerning is that there are already troublesome groups like the Heaven and Earth Society, the Four Evils Alliance, the Green Forest Faction, and the Jianggang River Bandits. This person's emergence alone can disrupt the current balance of the martial arts world. Disrupt the balance? In response to Vice Alliance leader Wei Takhian's question, military advisor Zhuge Duyang spoke in a serious tone. The Heaven and Earth Society and the Four Evils Alliance have been quiet recently, and the evil sects lack a prominent central figure. Central figure? Yes. Any faction requires an exceptional leader. Such individuals are said to possess the qualities of a leader or the qualities of a hero. Hero? Ah. Those wicked people from the evil sects, heroes. At least to those who aspire to walk the path of evil, they will be perceived as heroes. He single-handedly shattered Shaolin's reputation and forced the Sichuan Tang clan into seclusion. Has there ever been someone so boldly brazen among the evil sects? At Zhuge Duyang's words, Vice Alliance leader Wei Takhian's expression grew even more grave. Indeed, among the evil sect members, there had never been anyone who had made such a striking impact with just 2 actions. Vice Alliance leader, this is not a matter we can overlook. This person is truly dangerous. I am aware of that much. I will convene a meeting immediately. Yes. Please hurry. The martial artists who have already heard the rumors are hailing him as a new heaven. A new heaven? Don't tell me. Yes. Not the 6th heaven but the 7th heaven. The emergence of a new heaven close to evil. It was an ill omen for the dominant righteous factions and a ray of hope for the somewhat suppressed evil sects. Although he has passed away, he was the Lord I served, so I hope you'll understand the way I address him. I don't really care about such things. Just continue with your story. Very well. When the clan leader returned, there were even more red spots on his neck than usual. Seeing this, I knew that the clan leader had used the formless poison art. It wasn't something that would appear simply from training. The wounds visible on various parts of his body and the torn state of his clothing clearly indicated that he had been in a fierce battle. So, at that time I didn't know that the person he had fought was medicine immortal He Yang Jiangmun No. Of course you wouldn't know since he didn't say anything. Rather than that, based on the description of the person's appearance provided by the clan leader, I thought it might have been Ghost Blade. Mok Jiangun's eyes flickered with surprise. An unexpected individual had been mentioned. Ghost Blade? What do you mean? The clan leader who returned ordered all the bodyguards except for a few to search for a corpse downstream of the valley. Although I'm not sure if the body would be intact, based on the attire he described and the broken sword, it was undoubtedly Ghost Blade. Mok Jiangun stroked his chin, his eyes slightly narrowed. It was unexpected information. Based on this, if he were to summarize, the first person his grandfather encountered was undoubtedly Tang clan leader Tang Inhe. That bastard had come to kill his grandfather from the beginning. By killing his grandfather, he aimed to take possession of a woman named Yi Songa, who had inherited the ability of prophecy. After poisoning his grandfather with the formless poison, Tang clan leader Tang Inhe disappeared midway. However, it seemed that the one who existed in that disappearance was none other than Ghost Blade. He was chasing someone. Those were the words spoken by Li Guang, the second realm of the secret society, who had dealt the final blow to his grandfather. The person Ghost Blade was chasing was Tang clan leader Tang In-hei. The two of them fought, and if the words of Tang In-hu, the leader of the bodyguards, were true, the victor was Tang In-hei. Based on the uncertainty about the state of the corpse and the aftereffects of the red spots on the neck, Tang In-hei had used the formless poison art on Ghost Blade. Up to this point, it seemed that Ghost Blade had been killed by Tang In-hei. However, none of the individuals associated with the secret society believed that Ghost Blade was dead. Nearly half a year since that incident. No matter how secretive the secret society was, it was inconceivable that they would fail to notice the death of one of their executives for a whole 6 months. This meant that the likelihood of Ghost Blade being alive had significantly increased. Does that mean he endured the formless poison? Unexpected. Unlike himself, a poison man whose blood was poison itself, Ghost Blade had no means to counter the formless poison. Yet by what means did he survive? The more he learned about this person, the more questions arose. He could say that he had avenged those who had directly killed his grandfather, but he had yet to capture the ones behind them. To catch them, he still needed Ghost Blade. Is the society leader the answer after all? The deceased Li Guang had said that the society leader of the Heaven and Earth Society was the only one who could summon Ghost Blade. For now, the society leader was the only way to make contact with the secret society, so he had no choice but to return to the Heaven and Earth Society. His revenge was not over yet. It would only end when he killed all those behind it. Clatter. Clatter. Mok Jaeungun was sitting inside a carriage. There were 2 carriages in total. One of them was the carriage that Tang clan leader Tang In-hei had tried to escape in, but Sip Chun and Mong Muyak had skillfully stolen it and were making good use of it. They had divided the group into 2. One carriage carried Jiajiam Zhong, Sip Chun, Mong Muyak and Holy Fire Priestess, while the other carriage had Ma Are Hyan as the coachman with Mok Jaeungun, Yi Songa who was still unconscious, and 8 poison snake staff Gyeong Sao inside. The reason Gyeong Sao was riding in this carriage was simple. It was to detoxify the delicate poison that had affected Yi Songa's brain. Tang clan leader Tang In-hei had not only blocked her blood vessels but had also administered a delicate drug to her brain to ensure she would not wake up for a while, in case of any unforeseen circumstances. As a result, she had been unable to regain consciousness for nearly a week. However, starting from half a day ago, she had shown improvement due to Gyeong Sao's detoxification efforts, and based on her occasional eye flutters, it seemed she would awaken soon. Chapter 347, The Rumor, 2. 8 poison snake staff. Gyeong Sao carefully pulled out the long acupuncture needle from the head of Yi Songa, the granddaughter of Holy Fire Priestess, who lay motionless as if she were dead. During the process of removing the needle, Yi Songa's head trembled slightly. Soon, a black liquid oozed from the tip of the needle and seeped out through the hole in her head where the needle had been inserted. Seeing this, Gyeong Sao breathed a sigh of relief. Phew. Mok Jaeungun asked. Is it done? Yes. Fortunately, I managed to extract all the delicate poison. Excellent work. Ho ho. It's nothing. At Mok Jaeungun's praise, Gyeong Sao shrugged his shoulders with a sense of pride. When it came to poisons, Gyeong Sao was one of the top 3 experts across the Central Plains and the Western regions. Although Mok Jaeungun had also learned about poisons from his grandfather, medicine immortal He Yang, and the island poison king Baek Saha, and was proficient in their use, Gyeong Sao's extensive experience gave him an edge in handling intricate details. Is she completely detoxified? Yes. No matter how skilled the Tang clan bastard is, this level of poison is not a problem. Although the Tang clan leader Tang In-hei had personally administered the poison, as long as it wasn't the formless poison, Gyeong Sao was capable of detoxifying any type of poison. However, the brain was one of the most delicate areas to handle, so it inevitably took some time. She will wake up soon. It seems so. Exhale. Feel. As the delicate poison was expelled, her breathing changed. This alone indicated that the blood circulation to her brain had returned to normal. Blood circulation. Seeing this, Mok Jaeungun suddenly thought of Yu Mujin. Through his confrontation with Yu Mujin, Mok Jaeungun had vaguely grasped how his strength manifested. Yu Mujin's explosive power was achieved through the innate condensation of natural energy and the circulation of blood and expansion of muscles that were incomparable to ordinary people. Can I do it? This technique was more intricate than manipulating energy. Controlling muscles. Clench. Mok Jae-eun clenched his fist and tried to expand the muscles in his forearm and biceps. Even ordinary people could slightly expand their muscles by applying force to their developed muscles through training. However, is it impossible? The muscular expansion like Yu Mujin's seemed to be an entirely different matter. It went beyond the scope of ordinary muscles. It seemed that rather than being developed through training, it was greatly influenced by bloodline. Instead, trying to expand his muscles only drained his strength unnecessarily. Should I approach it differently? The method of infusing natural energy into the blood and rapidly circulating it seemed quite useful. Mok Jae-eun had a way to rapidly circulate blood, which he had grasped while becoming a poison man, so it seemed possible to try it out. Whoosh. Soon the skin on his clenched fist turned slightly red and felt hot. I think it's working. He tried to circulate it even faster. As a result, his right hand turned even redder and soon white steam rose from his skin. Seeing this, Mok Jae-eun's eyes flickered with surprise. If done well, it might be possible. However, as he circulated the blood even faster, the muscles in the area where the blood was rapidly circulating began to ache severely. It felt as if the blood vessels and the muscles at their center had ruptured. At this, Mok Jae-eun stopped. Whoosh. Witnessing this strange sight, 8 Poison Snake Staff Gyeongso asked in astonishment. What did you just do? I tried to circulate my blood rapidly. Blood? Not internal energy, but is it possible to rapidly circulate blood? Yes, it's possible. It's just a bit difficult to do it normally. At those words, Gyeongso frowned. No matter how advanced an expert he was, freely controlling the blood flowing within one's body was nearly impossible, even if he spoke of it casually. When the blood circulation speeds up, it puts a strain on the blood vessels and muscles. It made sense why Yu Mujin's muscles were developed. The thick, armor-like muscles protected his body from the rapid blood circulation. This meant that either overwhelming muscles were needed to support it, or a method was required to protect the body from strain when circulating blood. If he circulated the blood while protecting the blood vessels with internal energy, it might be possible to maintain it to some extent. In that case, it might be possible to stably amplify energy even more than when partially utilizing the reverse blood flow technique. For example, whoosh. If he circulated the blood even faster while protecting the blood vessels with the Heavenly Demon technique. Whoosh. At that moment, Mok Jae-eun's right hand and wrist turned dark red, no, a shade of brown, and steam rose from them. Seeing this, Gyeongso spoke with wide eyes. Advancing blood golden body? What? Isn't the technique you're using right now the advancing blood golden body? What do you mean? The technique Mok Jae-eun is currently using closely resembles the advancing blood golden body, the unique poison martial art of Hae Yokwon, the second leader of the Four Evils Alliance. Hae Yokwon. Ah. At those words, Mok Jae-eun recalled the conversation he had with Yu Mujin before parting ways at the Tang clan. Are you leaving? Yes. Since you said there's nothing that can be done about the demonic energy remaining in my heart, I have no choice but to return home and inquire about it. I apologize for that. The demonic energy lingering in his heart was due to the curse of the demon sword, plundering killing sword. The wound inflicted by plundering killing sword would not heal because of this demonic energy, which was no different from a curse. If it were an ordinary person, being struck in the heart by plundering killing sword would be considered a fatal condition, but thanks to the recovery power passed down through his bloodline, Yu Mujin was able to maintain his life. Demonic energy. In fact, Mok Jae-eun had considered using his Fong arts to treat Yu Mujin's demonic energy. Of course, he couldn't be certain that it would definitely work, but if this curse had arisen from a long-standing resentment, it might be possible to dispel it using Fong arts. However, he quickly dismissed the idea. Although the Sichuan Tang clan had agreed to a 60-year seclusion due to the agreement, it was questionable whether they would continue to abide by it. If they decided to seek revenge, it was uncertain whether Yu Mujin would offer to assist them. Therefore, he judged that it was better to leave the demonic energy of plundering killing sword intact, rendering Yu Mujin unable to fully exert his power. Then this is farewell. If you have nothing else to say, may I make one request? At Yu Mujin's words just as they were about to part ways, Mok Jae-eun looked at him with a puzzled expression. A request? It's nothing major. I'm a bit worried after observing you. What do you mean? There seem to be few who can stop a monster like you if you decide to go on a rampage. Our family has to continuously keep watch over that place, so we can't venture too far. At most, we can only keep an eye on the nearby Tang clan. That place. What is he talking about, keeping watch over something? Seems like they are guarding something. Then Yumujin spoke. Should I say it's a family matter? It's a form of service. Service. Hearing you say service makes me curious. It's nothing special. In the distant past, the founder of our family defeated an extremely large and white ox. However, this ox possesses tremendous strength and refuses to die. Mok Jiongun tilted his head. What is he talking about, suddenly mentioning a large ox? White ox? Yes. Anyway, the important thing is not that. If you happen to encounter someone with the surname He while roaming the martial arts world for revenge, I ask that you show mercy to them at least once. The surname He. Yes. They can be considered closer relatives to our family than the Tang clan. Of course, I've never met them personally. Is this a request? Yes, it's a request. This is also a form of connection. Can't you grant me this much? As long as they are not involved in my grandfather's death, I will do so. That's enough for me. But there must be more than one or two people with the surname He. How will I recognize them? I heard there are fewer than you think. And you'll be able to tell at a glance. Even though they aren't born with the same innate abilities as our clan, I heard they know how to control their bodies to some extent. Right. The person Yumujin had mentioned must be that He Yokwon. The phrase, know how to control their bodies to some extent, seemed to imply that he had mastered the method of rapidly circulating blood to explosively increase his power. They seem to call it the advancing blood golden body. Who is this He Yokwon person? He is the second leader of the Four Evils Alliance. He is known to possess martial prowess comparable to the 8 stars. I see. In any case, now that he knew the name and affiliation, there was no need to bother him unless he was entangled with the secret society. But wasn't the Four Evils Alliance a group formed by the remnants of the annihilated Nine Blood sect and other evil sect members? Little by little, connections seemed to be forming whether he knew it or not. At that moment, ugh. Along with a groan, Yi Songa, who had been asleep, opened her eyes. After blinking a few times, she suddenly sat up in surprise and looked around. Who are you? In response to her question, Gyeong So scoffed and said, after all the effort I put into treating you and waking you up, that's the first thing you ask? What? You should be thanking this person. Gyeong So politely pointed at Mok Jiongun with his palm. At this, her eyes widened. Having just awakened, she was disoriented and couldn't recognize who was who. However, after staring intently, she finally recognized Mok Jiongun's face, and her eyes were filled with joy. Ah. With tears welling up in her eyes, she immediately prostrated herself inside the carriage. Thud. She even banged her forehead hard against the floor. Surprised by her sudden action, Gyeong So couldn't understand. No matter how much I told you to be grateful. Only for this moment have I been waiting. At her overwhelming voice, even Mok Jiongun couldn't hide his confusion. She was seeing him for the first time, so why was she acting this way? As Mok Jiongun stared at her intently, he slightly moved his hand. Then her head, which was pressed against the floor, was lifted by the internal energy. Oh. As her head was raised against her will, her eyes trembled. Mok Jiongun asked her, what have you been waiting for? Aren't you seeing me for the first time today? The sacred orb showed you to me. Sacred orb? The Oi one that bestows the revelation of holy fire. That's right. The revelation told me that you would come to find me, the lowliest of the low, and pave the way for me. Pave the way. Yes. You are the one who will purify this tainted world with sacred flames and lead the foolish beings to the demonic path. Chapter 348. The Rumor 3. Yes. You are the one who will purify this tainted world with sacred flames and lead the foolish beings to the demonic path. At her voice filled with joy, Mok Jiongun's expression turned bland. Although he had secured her because of the prophecy or whatever it was, she was rambling on about something he had little interest in. So Mok Jiongun coldly drew the line. I'm not interested. What? At Mok Jiongun's words, Yi Songa, the granddaughter of Holy Fire Priestess, couldn't hide her bewilderment. As a devout follower of the Fire Faith Order, Although she had unintentionally inherited the ability of prophecy, she believed that everything she had seen through the sacred orb would happen in the future and that it was her duty to assist in it. Why is he reacting this way? If what she had seen through the sacred orb was true, the person in front of her was undoubtedly the one from the prophecy. But why was he showing such a cold reaction? In fact, he was treating it as if it were someone else's business from the beginning. The prophi. Shoo. Huh. What I'm curious about through you is not that. Is it true that you inherited the ability of prophecy? At Mok Jaeongun's question, Yi Song-ah felt inwardly disappointed. She had been waiting for him for a long time, but he was quite different from what she had expected. However, her disappointment didn't last long. Through the sacred orb, she had seen all of his disappointment, pain, sorrow, and anger towards the world. Therefore, she considered it natural for him to show such an indifferent attitude. Moreover, Ahura Mazda is a dual-natured deity, so he can be both a Spenta good god, and an Ahriman, that is, an Ingra evil god. He was not absolute good. He could be good to someone, but he could also be evil to someone else. That's why he is called a dual-natured being. Can't you answer my question? If you mean the ability to resonate with the sacred orb, then yes. Resonate with the sacred orb? Yes. To be precise. Did you say that you can only receive revelations if you have the sacred orb? That's correct. I see. And you saw me through that sacred orb? Yes. I saw you. That's why I ask you to lead us, the foolish beings, on the path you pave. At her request, Mok Jaeongun scoffed. He didn't know what kind of revelation it was that drove him like some kind of savior. He was far from being such a being. The path I walk is only stained with blood. If that is the process of purification, I can accept it to any extent. Purification. The current world is utterly tainted. In your absence. Let's stop talking about that. Mok Jaeongun waved his hand in dismissal. In the first place, he didn't even know what the being inside him was. However, both Holy Fire Priestess and this woman seemed to have high expectations of that being. But he was too different from the being they knew. The only thing that drove him was revenge. Enough of that. Let me ask you one thing. Command me. Do you know anything about the secret society? At this question, Yi Song-ah's eyes flickered with surprise. It seemed she also knew something about the secret society. Soon she opened her mouth. I don't know how long they have been with the Fire Faith Order, the main sect. But according to my grandmother, no Holy Fire Priestess, they are known to be like a shadow to the main sect. Shadow? Yes. But as far as I know, they are not with them now. I already know that from your grandmother. Grandmother? Yi Song-ah's eyes widened. She thought her grandmother was imprisoned in the golden prison of the imperial palace. At her reaction, Mok Jaeongun spoke with narrowed eyes. As I thought. Pardon. I doubt that the revelation can be called a prophecy. What do you mean by that? Exactly what I said. If the revelation is a prophecy, shouldn't it have known that the secret society tried to manipulate the Fire Faith Order as they pleased and betrayed them? That's. Moreover, it couldn't even foresee that Holy Fire Priestess would be released. I don't know what prophecy or revelation is. Are you saying my grandmother has been released? At that question, 8 Poison Snake Staff Gyeong-seo pointed to the back of the carriage with his thumb and said, She's in the carriage following behind. At those words, Yi Song-ah's eyes reddened. It seemed she had no idea that her grandmother was so close to her. Seeing her like this, Mok Jaeongun judged that the credibility of the revelation and prophecy was diminishing. What use was a power that couldn't even read one step ahead? It's merely symbolic. He thought there might be some value in using the prophetic power since it had been transferred to the granddaughter, but it didn't seem much different from the powerless Holy Fire Priestess. With a disappointed gaze, Mok Jaeongun spoke to her. I wanted to know what the leader of the secret society wants and where he is using the power of that revelation, but it seems that's difficult for you as well. Are you talking about what the leader of the secret society wants? Yes. But I don't particularly. The leader of the secret society desires your death. At her words, Mok Jaeongun flinched and looked into her eyes. Her reddened eyes had suddenly become serious. He wants my death. What do you mean? I don't know the exact reason, but if what I saw in the revelation is true, the leader of the secret society fears you. That's why he seeks to kill you. I can't understand. How can someone who has never seen me fear me? At Mok Jayongun's question she frowned. Then she carefully parted her lips. Could it be that the incarnation has no memory of him at all? Incarnation. Yes. As far as I know, you are his incarnation. Have you not accepted him who resides within you? At her words, Mok Jayongun's expression turned somewhat bland. At this she spoke, sensing his mood. I thought you had stepped forward because you had regained the power you had lost. I have no idea what you're talking about. It's still too early. At her sighing reaction, Mok Jayongun spoke in a sharp voice. Please speak in a way that's easy to understand. The revelation that comes through the sacred orb shows all the possibilities that may unfold in the future in fragments. That's why even I don't know when it will happen or if it will definitely happen. Isn't a possibility just a prediction? Prediction is imagination, but possibility is one of the many paths that can happen. One of the paths? Yes. This is a simple principle yet very complex. Although we met today, if by any chance my luck was bad and I had died at the hands of the Tang clan leader, there would have been a reality where I didn't meet you. It's a hypothesis. It can be called a hypothesis, but it's a possibility. Because in some path, the reality where I died and didn't meet you can happen. No matter how intelligent Mok Jayongun was, it was difficult to fully understand what she was saying. It was like trying to grasp a fleeting cloud. There are countless variables in the human world, so even a single discrepancy creates numerous branches of flow. Those chosen by the sacred orb read the possibility that comes closest among those branches of flow. In other words, it's not something that will definitely happen, but the possibility with the highest probability of happening. That's right. So, in the possibility you saw, was I that being called him? That's right. Flinch. She couldn't finish her words. The moment their eyes met, her entire body froze, and it was difficult for her to even breathe. Why was she reacting this way? Unable to understand, Mok Jayongun said to her, I am myself. Don't identify me with that being called him. Of course, I have no intention of silently accepting what you call him either. It was a kind of aversion. Why were they projecting that being called him onto him when he knew nothing? Moreover, after learning the truth that even his grandfather had considered him to be that being called him, and had hidden it from him until now, he felt as if his existence as Zhang was being denied. I absolutely don't think like that. You don't think that way? Really? It's true. Even if you, as an incarnation, don't accept yourself, I believe that you Seeing her suffering, Mok Jayongun suppressed the energy he was exuding. Then, as if it became easier for her to breathe, she exhaled roughly and continued speaking. I have no doubt that you are the one who will lead us. If you ask me to offer my life here, I will do so. At her blind devotion, Mok Jayongun snorted. Although she said she would sacrifice her life for him, it didn't evoke any particular emotion in him. Rather, it made him want to distance himself even more. Anyway, you're saying you don't know why the leader of the secret society fears me. That's right. You're not helpful at all. Clench. At Mok Jayongun's words, she bit her lip tightly. It hadn't been long since she realized that the power to receive revelations had been passed down to her due to the misguided choice of her grandmother, the current holy fire priestess. And because there were those who sought to exploit that power, she had desperately tried to hide it. But hearing such words from the one she had been waiting for made her feel overwhelmed. If you desire, I will resonate with the sacred orb and receive a revelation. Didn't you say it's just a possibility anyway? Reading that close possibility is the duty of us holy fire priestess. I will directly prove to you that I am a person you need. Oh, that's very reassuring. At Mok Jayongun's sarcastic remark, she trembled. Oh my. Watching this silently, Gyeongso scratched his head and smacked his lips. It seemed like she would cry at this rate. The lord he served in his later years seemed to have no hesitation regardless of whether it was a woman or not. So he carefully interjected. By the way, did you say your name is Song-ah? Yes. Where is that sacred orb? We already retrieved your belongings from the Tang clan, but we couldn't find anything that could be called a sacred orb. At his words she answered. I don't have it with me right now. You don't have it? Yes. I couldn't keep it with me because there was someone who coveted the power of the sacred orb. She thought of Tang Inhei, the Tang clan leader. Reading his hidden greed, she had judged that she shouldn't possess the sacred orb. Oh, so you hid it somewhere? Yes. Then where is it? It's in a cave on a cliff near Zhaoyang in the northern part of Hubei province. At those words, Gaiong Sao frowned. Then he exclaimed in surprise. Wait. If it's a cliff near Zhaoyang, isn't that where the spiritual sword sanctuary is located? That's right. Oh my. At Gaiong Sao's reaction, Mok Jiangun asked curiously. Do you know that place? Of course I do. The spiritual sword sanctuary is known as the Holy Land of the Sword. The Holy Land of the Sword? It's a place where countless sword masters who wield swords must visit to seek teachings. Chapter 349, The Rumor 4. Of course I do. The spiritual sword sanctuary is known as the Holy Land of the Sword. The Holy Land of the Sword? It's a place where countless sword masters who wield swords must visit to seek teachings. Is that so? It must be quite famous then. Ho ho ho. At Mok Jiangun's bland reaction, 8 poison snake staff Gaiong Sao instinctively knew that he had no knowledge of the spiritual sword sanctuary. The reputation of the spiritual sword sanctuary was truly high. There were 2 reasons for this. The first was that the majority of the famous swords in existence were made at this spiritual sword sanctuary. The owner of the spiritual sword sanctuary, O Qianmu, is the greatest sword craftsman of our time. A sword craftsman? Is he a blacksmith? That's right. Is that so? Don't people usually call them sword artisans? At this question, Gaiong Sao shook his head and said, Master O exclusively makes swords. He only makes swords? Yes. As far as I know, the spiritual sword sanctuary has only made swords in that place for hundreds of years. He doesn't make any other weapons? That's what I understand. It's quite an interesting place. A place that only makes swords. But I don't think it could have become famous just for that. Indeed. That family is said to be descendants of O Yezi, who was called the greatest swordsmith of the Yu Kingdom during the spring and autumn period. They have created the finest swords. The famous sword Iowai, the exclusive weapon of Zhang Haiyanmun, the leader of the Righteous Alliance, was also born from his hands. Oh. At those words, Mok Jiangun showed a reaction for the first time. If he was referring to the leader of the Righteous Alliance, he must be one of the heads of the 3 great powers in the martial arts world and one of the 6 heavens. If he was a craftsman skilled enough to make a sword for a top master of that caliber, he was undoubtedly extraordinary. If he's such an exceptional craftsman, it's no wonder that sword masters would line up. Indeed. However, Master O doesn't make swords for just anyone. That means it can't be obtained by paying a price, right? Ho ho. That's correct. From what I've heard, Master O has great pride as a craftsman. Therefore he only makes swords for those he acknowledges as true masters of the sword or those who pass his test. Well, if he makes such extraordinary swords, it's understandable for him to have that much pride. That's right. Since you also wield swords perhaps. No. I'm content with these 2 swords. Mok Jun tapped the 2 demon swords hanging from his waist with his palm. Evil Commandment Sword and Plundering Killing Sword. If there was a theory that the owner of the spiritual sword sanctuary was a descendant of O Yezi, these swords were made by O Yezi himself using a rare mineral called Guanya Black Iron. Of course. You already possess the finest swords. He possessed swords that ordinary people couldn't even handle. There was no need for him to be greedy for more swords. Then Mok Jiangun spoke. Anyway, it's fortunate. If it's just the territory of a group of craftsmen who make swords, there shouldn't be much difficulty in retrieving the sacred orb. At Mok Jiangun's words, Gaiong Sao showed a somewhat troubled expression. When asked why, the spiritual sword sanctuary is not simply a place that only makes swords. If not, then what? Do they also cultivate martial arts? It's as you said. They are sword craftsmen, but their knowledge of swords is also extremely high. Their knowledge of swords is high? Have you heard of the term, all streams return to one source? All streams return to one source? Doesn't it mean that 10,000 streams converge into one? That's right. All streams return to one source. It was a term originating from Buddhism, derived from the idea that no matter how one trained, the end was nirvana. Those who cultivated martial arts also often mentioned, all streams return to one source. This was because they believed that in the end the path would converge into one. The spiritual sword sanctuary believed that to make the finest swords, they had to fully understand the sword, and for that they honed their swordsmanship. Coincidentally, that made them understand the sword better than anyone else. They are sword craftsmen and exceptional swordsmen at the same time. That's right. But they're not just exceptional. Then, the owner of the spiritual sword sanctuary, Oh Qianmu, is one of the 6 heavens, the pinnacle of the current martial arts world. At those words, one of Mok Jiongun's eyebrows rose. Oh Qianmu, one of the 6 heavens and the supreme spiritual sword craftsman. He was one of the 6 pinnacles of the current martial arts world and was considered the closest to the top when it came to knowledge of the sword, not just martial arts. Mok Jiongun looked at Yi Songa, the granddaughter of Holy Fire Priestess, and asked, "How did you even get into such a place?" That's... Yi Songa hesitated to speak. It wasn't that she shouldn't say something, but her reaction was peculiar. Of course, Mok Jiongun paid no attention to this and said, "Don't waste your energy and just tell me. The 3rd son of the owner of the spiritual sword sanctuary is a follower of our Fire Faith Order." At those words, Gyeongso asked as if it were a coincidence. "Are you saying that the 3rd son of Master O is a follower of the Fire Faith Order?" "Yes." "Then did you hide the sacred orb through him?" Yes. At her cautious attitude, Gyeongso's eyes narrowed. It wasn't strange for someone to be drawn into the Fire Faith Order, even if a follower had come from a branch of the Sichuan Tang clan. But her unusually timid behavior was odd. Moreover, come to think of it, even if he's a follower of the Fire Faith Order, the sacred orb is a treasure of the Fire Faith Order. For him to be trusted enough to be entrusted with such a precious item, he must be really trustworthy. Could it be that he's your fiancé? At that moment, Mok Jiongun abruptly asked. At that question, Yi Songa's face instantly turned bright red. Seeing her reaction, Gyeongso clicked his tongue. His ability to read other people's emotions and thoughts was astounding. By the way, it was quite a coincidence that he was her fiancé. Oh my, is that true? Her face turning red as if it would burst, she couldn't answer out of embarrassment. Seeing this, Gyeongso laughed with a chuckle. It reminded him of his grandchildren. This was exactly the kind of reaction one would see at this age. On the other hand, Mok Jiongun couldn't understand her reaction. He vaguely understood what the emotion of fondness was, but was it something to be embarrassed about to this extent? He was puzzled. Suddenly, someone came to Mok Jiongun's mind as he looked at her. It was none other than Chong Ryung. He remembered Chong Ryung showing a similar reaction for some unknown reason. She was embarrassed? The corners of Mok Jiongun's mouth curled up slightly. Then Gyeongso spoke. Then Miss Songa's fiancé. Don't call him that. Just call him Oh Yinwo, a follower of the main sect. Oh Yinwo? Yes. Gyeongso smiled brightly. Seemed she really liked him a lot. Wasn't this the most shining moment in life? For him who had entered his twilight years, the sight of someone liking another and being embarrassed was the epitome of youth, so just watching it made him feel satisfied. Ahem. Anyway, young master. Since the 3rd son of Master O is a follower of the Fire Faith Order, it seems we can easily retrieve the sacred orb. You think so? At Mok Jiongun's doubtful tone, Yi Songa answered with a determined voice. I can bring it. I don't know if bringing it will be of much help. Mok Jiongun already didn't have much faith in the power of the sacred orb or the revelation. At this she became determined. If I find the sacred orb, I will receive a revelation of what you desire. I really hope so. If that happened, it could somewhat shorten the time. There would be no need to go through the leader of the Heaven and Earth Society. In the middle of a steep mountain range not far from Zhaoyang in the north of Hubei province. At that high location, there was a manor with a few houses gathered together. On the signboard at the entrance of the manor, it was written as follows. Spiritual Sword Sanctuary. Smoke from the forge rose from various places in the manor, and among them, there was a basement in a building without a chimney. And in that basement, there was a prison with iron bars, and inside, a young man with restraints on both arms was kneeling. The young man with a distorted face opened his mouth. Brother, please give it back. That's really... Shut up. A middle-aged man outside the iron bars reprimanded him. He was a man in his early 40s with dark skin and a well-developed upper body. In the man's hand was something that looked like a pouch. That's really... I told you to shut up. I wondered where you went every night and you were worshipping and revering this thing. The man took out what was inside the pouch. It was a sacred orb with an incomparably brilliant blue color. Clench. Seeing this, the young man bit his lower lip so hard that it bled. Yinhua. I knew you were involved in a heretical religion that deceives people, but aren't you ashamed? Your new mother thought you had come to your senses after returning. But you were doing this behind our backs. Instead of paying respects to our ancestors, how can you show such a pathetic sight? Brother. You won't have anything to say even if you have 10 mouths. I have never been ashamed of my choice. Gah. Before he could finish his words, the middle-aged man shouted in rebuke. The young man, No Yinhua, whose blood vessels were blocked, suffered from the rebuke infused with internal energy. His internal energy has deepened. The middle-aged man in front of him was his eldest brother, Wung Huang. He was the deputy owner of the spiritual sword sanctuary and the best swordsman except for his father, the owner. Brother. Stop it. The one who spoke now was a man in his late 30s with slit eyes, Gu Eung-suk, the second brother who was born from the same mother as the eldest brother, Wung Huang. Unlike them, Yinhua was their half-brother and the youngest. You think I can stop now? Our youngest brother is doing this absurd thing and you say nothing about it. Brother. Whether we like it or not, he is a member of our Gu family, and even if we have different mothers, we are still brothers. Hate the sin, not the person. You're saying such nice things. Moreover, with the massacre that occurred near the cliff and the Righteous Alliance sending people, it's quite a mess. I think it's time to stop this appropriately. Phew. The eldest brother, Wung Huang, let out a sigh close to a lament. He wanted to reprimand him more out of anger, but what his second brother said was right. It was already a mess because the people from the Namgung clan who had visited the main sanctuary and were descending the mountain were all slaughtered, including the clan leader. Because of this, the main sanctuary was also under suspicion, and the people sent by the Righteous Alliance were being troublesome. With his father's mood also unpleasant, he couldn't keep the boy locked up any longer. Stay here for a while, cool your head and reflect on your actions. Brother. If you don't come to your senses, I'll keep you locked up for the rest of your life. If you don't want that, you better show some proper reflection. Brother, please just give that back. You fool. Bang. Wung Huang kicked the iron bars with his foot and went upstairs with an angry face. As he went up, the second brother, Wung Song, clicked his tongue and spoke in a sarcastic voice. I told you not to come back, didn't I? Why did you come back and make things worse? Tiske. After reprimanding him once more, Wung Song waved his hand and went upstairs. Nash. Yinhua gritted his teeth as he looked at the stairs leading to the upper floor. Unlike the eldest brother, the deputy owner Wung Huang, the second brother Wung Song was a snake-like man. Although he was the youngest, he had always envied and bullied him for his superior talent as a craftsman. That's why they had never gotten along since childhood. Even now, it must have been that bastard who had followed him and told the eldest brother. What should I do? Being trapped here wasn't a big deal. However, the sacred orb, which could be considered the embodiment of holy fire itself, had been taken away. Putting aside his eldest brother, he couldn't guess what that Wung Song would do, knowing how much he cherished this. Clench. Song. He felt sorry for her. She had trusted him and entrusted it to him, but he never thought he would be caught so absurdly like this. Yinhua mumbled with his mouth and finally spat something out. Tui. Clink. It was a thin and long wire. Even in his confusion, he had managed to secretly take it just in case. I have to get it back somehow. The sacred orb was a precious treasure of the order. Burly-looking men wearing leopard skin and fur clothing, with clubs and weapons on their shoulders, surrounded something. It was a prison cart for transportation. Inside the wooden cage was a woman whose clothes were half torn, revealing her white flesh in various places. The woman with half-white hair and a mysterious aura exuded a strange atmosphere, perhaps because of the clothes she was wearing. Outside the prison cart where she was, there was an old woman leaning on a cane. The old woman spoke to the woman. This much should be enough to deceive them, Lady Chunchu. You think so? With this much, do you think they won't be able to resist? That's right. Men are always eager to act like a knight-errant even for trivial reasons if given a proper pretext. Hehe. Indeed. Moreover, if they see you, Lady Chunchu, so beautiful, captured by rough bandits, they absolutely won't be able to resist. Of course, even if it seems like a simple and shallow trick, it unexpectedly works well. Ho ho ho. She shrugged her shoulders with a triumphant look. They had prepared according to the carriage's route, so now they just had to wait for him to come. In about half a shurchen he will pass by here. Whoosh. At that moment, a gust of wind blew as if a storm had rushed in. The sudden wind made her subordinates, who were acting as rough bandits, flustered and confused. But in that fleeting moment, Lady Chunchu and the old woman looked up. Swish. Something passed above them at a tremendous speed. It was only a brief moment, so it was very blurry, but it was clearly something riding on a sword. Seeing this, Lady Chunchu spoke with a stiff face. That just now it was him, right? Chapter 350, Spiritual Sword Sanctuary. 1. Flap. Yi Songa, the granddaughter of the Holy Fire Priestess, was startled awake by a light slap to her face. Hyuk. Are you feeling better now? At this question, Yi Songa looked at Mok Jiongun with a pale face. Then she, immediately ran behind a tree trunk and started retching. Should have gone a bit slower, huh? At Chong Ryong's tongue clicking, Mok Jiongun shrugged his shoulders. To avoid wasting time, he had told the others to follow and then picked her up, flying here using sword flight. But because they flew at such a high speed, she couldn't handle the strain on her breathing and ended up fainting. And as soon as she woke up, she started vomiting like this. It's been a while since we've been here. At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jiongun's eyes glinted with interest. You say it's been a while? Yes. This place existed even in the era when I was active. Really? You didn't say anything earlier, so I had no idea. I was just surprised to hear that the master of this place is said to have knowledge of swords close to being the best in the world. Was it not like that before? Even back then their level was quite high. But it seems they finally reaped the fruits of their labor. What do you mean by finally reaping the fruits? It's because of their method. Is there some special method? Indeed, it's special. The reason their swords are called the best is because they craft them to fit the swordsman's physique, habits, and sword techniques. Physique, habits, that's HM? Sword techniques. Mok Jiongun raised one eyebrow as if something was strange. Then she snorted and said, to commission a sword from them, you have to reveal your unique sword technique. That's one of the conditions for crafting. Now Mok Jiongun understood why she said they had reaped the fruits of their labor. If that's the basic condition, then they must know almost every sword technique out there. That's right. If they know all the sword techniques in the world, their insight into swords would naturally be higher than anyone else's. Did Chong Ryong also have a sword made here? At that question she nodded. As you guessed. They even know the early sword techniques of you. Interesting. But if they know so many sword techniques, it seems like a lot of interesting things must have happened. Well, I don't know what happened while I was sealed, but before that nothing happened. Why not? Because they weren't told the chi circulation methods or mental techniques that pair with the sword techniques. All they know are the sword paths of the techniques. Of course, even with just this, one could say they know a lot, but strictly speaking it's only half the picture. So that's why you said only their knowledge of swords. That's right. Even back then their insight into swords was higher than mine. That knowledge must have accumulated over time, so I'm curious how advanced they are now. Now that you mention it, I'm curious too, but it doesn't seem like we'll have any reason to go inside. Well, I suppose not. What they came to retrieve was the Fire Faith Order's treasure, the orb. They didn't come to sightsee Spiritual Sword Sanctuary. Meanwhile, Yi Songa, who had been retching for a while, seemed to have recovered somewhat and approached with a pale face. Are you feeling better now? Why, yes. Do you know where we are? At Mok Jiongun's question she nodded. She couldn't not know, having visited this place once before. To her, Mok Jiongun said, by the way, were there usually many people wandering around the manor? What do you mean by that? Suk. Emenpich. Mok Jiongun suddenly covered Yi Songa's mouth. She couldn't hide her bewilderment at his sudden action. Then Mok Jiongun picked her up and with a light movement, jumped up onto a tree branch. How? Her eyes widened. Even though he was carrying her, this slender tree branch didn't break and remained intact. As she was marveling at this, footsteps could be heard from below. Soon a group of about 4 warriors appeared with justice embroidered on their upper garments. Justice. Mok Jae-un's eyes glinted with interest at the sight of them wearing the same outfit. Then as they wandered around they spoke. Strange. I could have sworn I heard something like a pig squealing around here. A pig squealing? You know that queok sound. At their conversation Yi Song-a's face turned bright red. To think they'd compare her retching sound to a pig squealing. It was so embarrassing. As they looked around, one warrior said, "But do you think we can find the culprit or any traces by looking around here? We have to do something. There's nothing else we can do." That's true. Anyway, the only person with the martial prowess to single-handedly kill that many people would be Master O. Right. Staying here is just a waste of time. But isn't it strange to assume the culprit is Master O? Why? Master O was working when the incident occurred, wasn't he? Besides, Master O is a swordsman, but all the wounds on the dead were from blade techniques. That's what makes it more suspicious. Everything seems to point away from the master too conveniently. What if the master is actually a hidden expert in blade techniques? Well, that's true, but does it make sense to openly do something like this in their own territory? It's a matter of true and false. Who would think the master is the culprit when it's right under their nose? It's difficult. Very difficult. That's how investigations are. Once you start suspecting, everyone looks like a culprit. Anyway, if we keep loitering around here, the elders might say something, so let's move. All right. After the warriors left, Mok Jae-un and Yi Song-a descended to the ground shortly after. As soon as they came down, Yi Song-a said to Mok Jae-un, "Those people just now were warriors from the Righteous Alliance." The Righteous Alliance? Yes. The Fire Faith Order had many enemies, so Yi Song-a also remembered the attire of those who targeted them. Do people from the Righteous Alliance usually come and go here often? How could that be possible? No. Chong Ryong and Yi Song answered simultaneously to that question. At this, Mok Jae-un stroked his chin. He wasn't sure exactly what had happened, but based on their conversation, it seemed that an incident had occurred where many people were killed by a single person. So the Righteous Alliance warriors were trying to find the culprit. But they mentioned Master O as a prime suspect, which seemed to refer to the Master O of Spiritual Sword Sanctuary. It was an incredible coincidence. They had just come to find the orb, but it seemed a major incident had occurred big enough to involve the Righteous Alliance. However, Mok Jae-un soon decided to ignore it. It wasn't related to him anyway, and all they needed to do was find the orb. So Mok Jae-un said to Yi Song, "Where is this cave you mentioned?" "It's..." "Don't say it out loud, just point with your finger. From now on, we need to move very discreetly." "Huh? You don't mean..." "Shoo. I told you to keep quiet." "Pat." Mok Jae-un moved while carrying her. He judged that it would be easier to conceal their presence if he moved while carrying her, given his mastery of lightness techniques. In front of a building in Spiritual Sword Sanctuary. Chong, chong, chong. The crisp sound of hammering flowed out from the building. Along with these metallic sounds and the heat-filled forge, there was a group of warriors in uniform standing in front. The warriors' clothes were embroidered with the word justice. They were warriors belonging to the Righteous Alliance. There were two people who seemed to be leading these individuals. One was a middle-aged Buddhist nun in Taoist attire, standing with her hands behind her back and a benevolent face. The other was a handsome man who appeared to be in his mid-30s. These were members of the Righteous Alliance. The nun was Elder Zhang Myong Sate of the Hangshan sect. And the man in his mid-30s was Moyong Hak, the eldest son and heir of the Moyong family, one of the 7 great families. Hyo. Amit Ba. Elder Zhang Myong Sate of the Hangshan sect let out an exclamation. It was no wonder, as the rhythmic hammering sounds were refreshing and invigorating, giving a feeling as if one's chest was being cleared. Extraordinary. She had heard of the reputation, but even just the hammering was enough to leave her speechless. It was so excellent that it made decades of study feel futile. Unlike her, the interest of Moyong Hak, the heir of the Moyong family, was focused elsewhere. Are those the failed swords made by the master? There were swords stuck in something like a large incense burner outside the building. The large incense burner was engraved with the words "broken swords," and it was said that swords that failed to properly form a sword core were stuck there before being destroyed. However, for swords called broken, each one boasted an extraordinary appearance. No, even these could almost be called famous swords. Gulp. Moyong Hak unconsciously swallowed his saliva. Originally, according to Spiritual Sword Sanctuary's rules, one could only come to the Master's forge if they were particularly renowned as a swordsman or passed a test given by the Master. However, given the current situation, they were able to enter as special investigators from the Righteous Alliance. Creak. At that moment, the door of the forge opened and someone came out. They instinctively knew it wasn't the Master coming out because the hammering sound was still continuing. Chuck. The person who came out was none other than O Woong Huang, the young Master of Spiritual Sword Sanctuary. He put his hands together and said in a respectful voice, "I apologize. Master says he cannot meet you as he is at a crucial point in the birth of a new sword, and asks for your understanding." As expected. At these words, Moyong Hak clicked his tongue inwardly. He had hoped to build some rapport with the Master because of the incident, but he wasn't showing his face at all. Yet it wasn't appropriate to force the issue. O Qianmu, the Master of Spiritual Sword Sanctuary, was one of the six heavens, the pinnacle of the current martial world, and also belonged to the elder generation in terms of seniority, so he couldn't be treated carelessly. That's unfortunate. I had hoped to at least pay my respects to the eldest, the Master. I'm very sorry. Once my father starts crafting a sword, due to his unique stubbornness as a craftsman, he won't show his face even if the alliance leader were to come. Amit Ba. I understand. How could a craftsman stop his work? It's just sad that we haven't been able to see the Master yet, even though we've been here for several days. Elder Zhang Myong Sate spoke in a gentle voice as if to say it didn't matter. At this, O Woong Huang cautiously asked, "But how is the investigation progressing? For now, our alliance's warriors have blocked all mountain paths in the surrounding area and are proceeding, but it seems difficult to find the culprit." I suppose it would be. It wasn't just anyone but Namgung Jin, the skyward swordless of the 8 stars, who had been killed. Although not reaching the level of the 6 heavens, the 8 stars were also among the greatest martial artists in the world. He and the elites of the Namgung family had all met their deaths. What was astonishing was that the traces suggested it was the work of a single person, not multiple attackers. I've never seen blade marks like these before in my life. Elder Zhang Myongsa clicked her tongue as she spoke. She had been inwardly shocked when she first examined the bodies. This was because the blade marks left on the bodies each contained trajectories that could not be performed by any existing blade techniques. Blade marks that surpass the limits of joints. Is this really a blade wielded by a human? It even raised such doubts. However, since the bodies were discovered, it was clear that they had died at someone's hand. And the most likely suspect was, as Elder Sate knows, my father has known nothing but swords his entire life. That goes for our entire family, as well. For just a moment, so brief that it was hard for anyone to notice, young Master O Woong Huang hesitated in his speech. It was because of the youngest member of the family who was considered a troublemaker. Why must it be swords? Isn't our stagnation due to our obsession with swords alone? That was what the brat used to say habitually before leaving home. He didn't bend his stubbornness even after being scolded by his father, the Master, and himself. But it was truly questionable. It was strange enough that he suddenly returned just when such a tremendous incident occurred, but he also brought a bizarre orb whose composition was difficult to determine. Anyway, that wasn't the important thing right now. If all the traces left on the bodies are blade marks, shouldn't our family be excluded from suspicion, even if the deceased was one of the 8 stars? Elder Zhang Myong Sate put her hands together and answered this somewhat emotional voice. Amit Ba. I apologize. As you know, that's difficult to do. Although there are a couple of guests at Spiritual Sword Sanctuary who could match Patron Namgung, it's absolutely impossible for them to have done this alone. Elder Sate. But my father. I know. There are plenty of people who can testify that he was still here at the time the incident occurred, and he's originally a swordsman. However, he's also the only one capable of causing such a massacre. Young Master O Woong Huang sighed in frustration. Of course, it was true that if Father No the Master were to make up his mind, he had the martial prowess to slaughter all the people from the Namgung family who had visited the main hall. It wasn't for nothing that he was called one of the 6 heavens. However, crucially, Father had never left this place and wasn't a blade user. Yet there were 2 reasons why they still considered him a suspect. One was, as mentioned earlier, due to his martial prowess, and the second was, Rejecting Namgung family head's request was a big factor. Namgung Jin, the head of the Namgung family and one of the 8 stars, known as the Skyward Swordless, had visited and offered to provide rare iron if a sword was crafted exclusively for him. But this request wasn't just once. This was the 3rd time. Coincidentally, father had been dedicating himself to crafting a single sword for 2 years, and had been rejecting and postponing all recent requests from visitors. However, no matter what rules Spiritual Sword Sanctuary has, refusing to even show one's face to a guest who has come 3 times is not the spirit of craftsmanship, but the height of arrogance. Namgung Jin, the head of the Namgung family, had shown signs of discomfort and left, unable to meet the master despite visiting each time, no matter how great a craftsman he might be. Some guests in the reception hall had witnessed him express the only negative emotions towards the father, and some testified to this, leading to the current situation. It was truly a frustrating situation. As if to soothe his state of mind, Moyong Hak said, "We also don't believe Master O would have done such a thing. However, as we've come as investigators, we must be certain and therefore must meet the master. I know it's frustrating, but please understand. There was one thing they wanted to confirm. Swords and blades are distinctly different. Therefore, the calluses formed on the palm due to the gripping method would inevitably be different. Moreover, what they learned from the blade marks was that the joints and muscles of the person who used this blade technique would be in a completely different form from ordinary people. In conclusion, they couldn't conclude the investigation until they met the master of Spiritual Sword Sanctuary. A cliff cave not far from the mountainside where Spiritual Sword Sanctuary's estate was located. This can't be happening." Isanga was bewildered. She had hurriedly searched inside the cave for the orb as soon as they arrived. But it wasn't there. Rather, as if something had happened here, the walls inside the cave were broken and the floor was cracked, leaving the place in a mess. Mok Jiongun examined this closely. Sword marks. Some of the messy traces were unmistakably sword marks. It seemed that 2 swordsmen who were quite skilled with swords had fought here. However, one side had overwhelmingly superior sword skills. Because of this, it appeared they had been subdued in just a few moves. The subdued side had their back to the inner part of the cave, and despite being clearly outmatched in sword skills, they still tried to move forward. That means it was someone trying to protect something. They desperately tried to prevent the opponent from coming inside. To this, Mok Jiongun said, "Did you hide the orb in the innermost part of the cave?" "Yes. I'm sure I did. It seems someone fought in here. One side was desperately trying to protect the entrance, while the other was trying to get inside. It's Yanwo. I don't know who Yanwo is, but what's interesting is that despite being outmatched in skill, they didn't retreat a single step and desperately tried to stop the opponent." Isanga's eyes welled up at these words. From Mok Jiongun's words, she was certain that the one who desperately blocked was Oh Yanwo. Then, as Mok Jiongun was examining the traces, he spoke as if he had realized something. "It seems the opponents knew each other well." "What?" "They're using very similar sword techniques. And the one trying to enter the inner part of the cave." Fung. Opening the power of the 3 eyes with his right eye, Mok Jiongun could see the trajectories of the sword swings more clearly in his vision. It was the residual thoughts of true chi remaining after unleashing the sword techniques. Seeing this made it even more certain. The one trying to enter the inner part of the cave was using techniques that avoided fatal moves as much as possible, aiming to subdue rather than kill the opponent. Rather than enemies, it's more likely they're from the same school, brothers or blood relatives. "Didn't you say Oh Yanwo was the 3rd son of Spiritual Sword Sanctuary? Then we have our answer." Isanga was dumbfounded at Mok Jiongun's deduction. Was it possible to display such insight from just these messy traces?